Hi everyone, welcome back again. Today we will continue with whatever sessions that we have done yesterday. We have understood what is constructor, what is classes, what is object, on a very high level, right? So as long as you can understand what is a class, an object, and what are the variables, what is called methods, it's well and good, right? So it's a it's a base, right? So once you have the base very strong, and then you can build, easily build on further. Good. So now I have mentioned something, right? So while creating objects, I have clearly told, okay, this is a constructor, right? So whatever you see here is a constructor, but I haven't explained much on that. So only thing that I mentioned is it reserves a space for you, and then it also initialize the variables for you, right? For example, we have employee class where it initialized these values with to the default values of zeros and nulls accordingly, right? For boolean it default to false. So we have seen two constructors, right? So two uses of constructor. There is other uses also. That's what we are going to see today. Before that, we also want to understand, in Java project we have some out folder where we have that, dot class files. So normally we write our code in dot java files, which the compiler will compile and convert to machine readable dot class files, and these class files were stored in the some out dot bin dot some folders. But in case of maven, by default it gets stored in, so src is the place where we are coding, and target is the place where these class files are getting stored. Okay, for example, I have previously ran that code, so it has produced some dot class file, so it has compiled the code, converted into machine readable format, and now we could also see inside src test we have java. Here also there is test2 test, here also test2 test. So we'll have, these are all dot class files. Okay, if you notice, these are all dot class files, these are all dot java files which we wrote. So for example, I'll open the employee dot class file. Okay, if you notice, this is an employee dot class file, this is an employee dot java file. If you notice very closely, everything will remains the same, but there is one new component, that is something here, public employee, and this is what I am calling it as constructor. So if you are defining a class, by default it creates a constructor for you. So every object you create, okay, will use the constructor to reserve the space to also initialize the variables for you. So even if you are not defining it, okay, you have not defined it here, okay, but by default it will have a constructor like this. Okay, what is a constructor? That's what, we already know what is the purpose of it, but by the name we can tell the name is constructor. It helps you to, okay, it helps to construct the object. It not only resource the memory for you, it not only initialize the variable for you, it will also help you to construct the object. For example, now you want to give some default age. Okay, for example, we are not hiring any childs, right? So by default what I want to do, I want to set the age as 18. I don't want to set the age as 0. Okay, so what I can do, I can basically set age equal to 18. So now the default value is now changed by constructor. So every time you create an object, so here if I go here, when I create an object, okay, it will make a call to the constructor. So if I press control and click on it, it will come and call this statement. So it understand by default, whatever the object you are going to create, I'm going to make the age as 18 as a default value instead of 0. So you can, if you are not doing anything with your constructor, you can remove this. Okay, it's not mandatory. But if you are using your constructor to initialize values yourself or change the default values, then you have to define them like this. Okay, so the constructor will have same name, constructor will have same name as class name. Okay, it will look like a method, it will look like a method. Okay, but it is not a method. Okay, but it is not a method. because if you notice, this is the method. So work is a method. So let me cut this, and then the order doesn't matter, guys. You can keep anything in anywhere. Okay, so it just look like a method. See, public employee, two brackets and then a curly braces. Here also it's all same, but just the return type is not here. Okay, the constructor by default does not return anything. Okay, it does not have any explicit return type. Okay, so it doesn't return anything. So normally you don't have to mention void and all here. Okay, normally it won't return anything. Okay, so it doesn't have the capability to return anything. The only job is to construct the object. It will help you to construct the object. So by default you can also assign some values to it. So age equal to 18. Okay, now if I go to the demo test or wherever now, I want to print see for employee, we have these things set. Maybe I'll remove all the unnecessary stuff. Okay, uh, so we have only one employee. We have set ID, company name, permanent employee, but we haven't set the age itself. So let's try to print age and see what's happening. Okay, employee dot age. Okay, let's see what's happening. So now if you notice, the age is 18, right? So you can also add age in front so that you can able to read it properly. Okay, good. Now let's put a debug point and see when this constructor is getting called, when this value is being set and all that. So let me put a debug point here and let's try to debug it. So every time you create an object, this constructor will be called. Okay, so now I'm trying to do step in. Okay, so which means it will go into the, see, this is now getting called when you are calling new of employee, which means it will call the constructor. Okay, so now it's here. I'm doing a step over. So now it went one step inside. So by default, the age is 0 now. Okay, so it will try to alter it, and now the age becomes 18. Okay, so that's how the constructor works. So if you do a step over again, it goes here. So it has created an employee object with the age as a default value of 18. Okay, next it'll go and set the ID value. Yes, and then company value, and then the permanent employee. Okay, good. And yeah, so once this is all done, it will also set it again. Yeah, it will print it. So this is how it works. Okay, now let's go to the employee class again and see. It's not only about age. You can define whatever you want. Suppose you want to give some, instead of null, you want to give some values for all the people, because company name is common for everyone. So what I can do, company name equal to, let's say, ABCD. Okay, so I don't have to even define that, okay, anywhere. So for everyone it's same, right? So I can directly give this value here. Okay, so now from this particular class, okay, what you can basically do is, if you try to print the company name now. Okay, I have employee.company name. Okay, if you try to print it, it'll print ABCD. Okay, good. So this is the use of constructor. Okay, it's just a simple use of constructor. Okay, it can help you to alter the default value set. Apart from that, if you want to make something mandatory, suppose let's say if an employee joining your company, you want to make sure that they are passing ID, first name, last name, and then whether they are permanent employee to your company as a mandatory thing. Okay, they need to definitely give all these details. Okay, then what you can do, while creating the object itself, we can tell that. Okay, so I'm going to do, I'm going to create one more constructor. If I have to create constructor, what I have to go, I have to give a name like employee, and then open cross brackets, and then like this. And now I want to make them to pass their employee ID, first name, last name, and whether they are permanent employee or not. These two fields, age and temporary name, are optional fields. Okay, they are optional for now. Okay, this is the current scenario. Just imagine this. Okay, now what I'm going to do. So while you're creating objects itself, you need to pass. So first you need to pass the ID. Okay, it's like a method, right? So you can pass arguments int id, and then you can pass string first name, and then you can pass string last name, and then at the end boolean is permanent employee. So you need to pass all these things. Now let's go to the employee class, sorry, the demo test. And if you I want to create a new employee, so employee of, so let's name this employee as Rahul, and equal new employee. Okay, now this time it has two options for you. Okay, first, either you can call the default constructor without anything, so without any value being passed to it. Okay, or you can also pass all the mandatory values. So for now what I'm doing first is you have to pass it in exact order. So first there is an id, first name, last name, permanent employee. So first id, I can just mention one. First name is basically Rahul, second name, so last name is basically Dravid. Okay, and also at the end I want to pass whether he's a permanent employee or not. So yeah, he's a permanent employee, right? So now if you notice, we have passed all these values while creating the object itself. So we are creating the object. While creating the object itself, we passed all these values. Okay. So what you can basically do is if I try to print all these values, so let's say Rahul dot id. Okay. And then you can print s out of Rahul dot first name, whatever. Okay. You will tend to see all the answers. Okay, so if you notice, it is actually printing zeros and null because because we are passing this, but we are not assigning this to these values. Okay, so what I have to do once I get this, okay, there is ID here. There is also ID here. I need to assign this value to this ID. Okay, so what I have to do, um, so let's name it as this is param one. For now, let's rename this to param one, param two. I have a reason behind that. I'll tell you. Param three and parameter. So that's a short form for param. Okay, uh, param four. So what I'm going to do, if someone is passing me an int, I'm going to assign this to ID. So whatever the ID I have, I'm going to assign this value. Okay. So your left hand side, that is ID, is getting assigned with this particular value. Next, I have first name. Okay, first name equal to param 2. Okay, and then last name equal to param 3. Whatever the parameter that is coming third, I will assign to last name. Next is boolean, so that is permanent employee. Whatever the value that is coming in that fourth parameter, I'm assigning here. Once this is done, now these values will be instead of default values, the default values will be changed to whatever the values that we passed. Let's try to go to the demo test and then again run the test. So if you now notice, the Rahul's ID is now getting printed as one, but which is what we passed. Okay, and the first name is also getting printed correctly. The same way, the last name and the is permanent employee will also be printed. So that's the power of constructor. So in constructor you can define while creating an object what and all the parameters you need to pass as a mandatory fields that you can define. Okay, that's the power of constructor. Suppose tomorrow you are thinking, okay, okay, now I also want to make so I have all the other information also. Age also I also have the other information, which is company name. I also have all this information with me. Then how will I create? Okay, do I have to separately create that? Okay, instead of that, what you can do, you can also create one more constructor. Okay, it's almost imagine it's like our add method. Okay, when so we had an add method. Okay, that is something like this. We had an add method, okay, that takes int a, int b, okay, and it just printed a plus b. Okay, and then what we did, we also added one more method, that is public static void add int a, int b, int c. Okay, and we also printed a plus b plus c, right? The same way we also had one more method that accepts uh, uh, long type long a. Okay, long Guys, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, Muthan, yeah. We
Sorry guys,
lost you
I
for a
think
moment.
my internet was bad and it got disconnected, so I have to move, switch to my mobile hotspot. It's all good now. So can you all followed me till here, or when I got lost? Not sure.
In the very first method, Muthan,
Here?
the very yes.
Yeah, okay, no problem.
A plus
Thank.
B.
Sorry?
A plus B system dot out of println of
Yeah,
A
yeah,
plus
yeah.
B.
Fine. Yeah, I'll cover that. No problem.
Yeah.
So, uh, anyway, so what happened? So we had a previously had a method called add, where we want to sum two numbers. We sum like this and then print it. And then we, if we want to pass long types, or suppose we want to pass decimals, okay, then we used double, right? And we didn't use long, but we used double. Okay. So yeah, so we want to sum two decimal numbers, we use this, right? So this is what is called as method overloading, because first, if you just called add, it will try to find, let's say I am calling add. Okay, I'm calling add with 5 comma 6. Okay, what it does is it tries to search for a method with a name called add. Once it finds a lot of methods, it will try to understand, based on the parameters, it will try to understand which method I need to call. For example, here both are integers, so it will try to call these methods. Suppose if I add one more here, so now it understand there are three arguments, and it will search for a method called add that has three arguments, and this will come and match this, and it will execute this. The same way, if I give add of 5.67 comma 9.08, something like this, then it understand, even though there are two arguments, okay, that there are two methods matching two arguments and add name, it tries to understand with the help of decimal points that it needs to call this particular method, right? This is what we understand. This technically is called as method overloading. So we have a method that is overloaded with different, you know uh, other companions, like, they have the same name. The method which is having same name but different arguments, or different number of arguments. Okay, for example, this has same number of arguments but different types of arguments. Okay, one is int, one is double. Or if they are having a same name and different number of arguments, for example, this is 2, and for example this is 3. So all these methods are called as overloaded methods. They are called as overloaded methods technically. Okay, technical terms we can learn at a later point of time, but for now, just imagine these are called as overloaded method. The same way, we are going to overload our constructor. Okay, so let me remove all these things, and here, if you notice, we have created an employee object, and the same way we are creating another employee object, but this time we are overloading the constructor. Previously we didn't pass any number of arguments. Okay, so you have as I already told, constructor is like a method, but it's not a method. So this is like a method, so we are calling the constructor, but this time with a different number of arguments, correct? So we call it as constructor overloading. There we call it as method overloading. This is called as constructor overloading. The same way, suppose you have all this age and company name also with you, then I'm also going to create one more constructor, public. So maybe I'll copy paste, because if I type, it will take a lot of time. So if someone is passing me int age, and then at the end string company, or I'll just put it param 5, and then string company, or param 6. Okay, now fifth parameter I will assign to age. If someone is passing me the param 5, I will pass it here. And then last one is company name, which I will use to param 6. Okay, yeah, so if somebody is ready, I'll pass them all these things. Okay, so now I go here. I'll try to create one more, that is so employee. Let's this time create employee for Virot, and new employee, and this time I'll pass an ID, and the first name is Virat, and last name is basically Kohli, and he is also a permanent employee. Okay, and what else we have to pass the age, right? See, I am forgetting the order in which I need to pass. So basically, next I need to pass param 5, which is basically mapped to age. So I need to pass an age. So age is, let's say, he is 38, and at the end is company name is basically ABCD, whatever. Okay. Now this is all good. The same way you can now print out anything, and then so let's say Veera, the reference variable, and then age. Okay. Yeah. So now we can run this test. So it's now printing the age of the Virat. So we can have constructors. Okay. This is the default constructor. Even if you don't create yourself, it will automatically create it for you. So for example, previously we didn't had, but now if you notice, even in the dot class files, we have default constructor that is doing some operations, employee constructor, and then this particular employee constructor with different parameters, right? So yeah, so this is what it does. So we have a default constructor. If you don't create it, it'll automatically be there. For example, in the string constants class, we don't have a constructor here, but it is not visible to our naked eyes. It is actually here. Okay, string constants, a constructor like this is actually present here. Okay, if you don't believe me, you can always go to the dot class files and then see it. Okay, for example, this string constants is basically present in the main package. So I'll go here, I'll open this dot class files, and if you notice, this is actually present here. So yeah, every class will have its default constructor. If you want, you can define them, or by default it will be created implicitly. You don't have to worry about it. Okay, but if you want to do some operation with your default constructor like this, then you have to definitely put it here. And also, if you're creating some overloaded constructors, you also need to define this mandatorily. For example, if I remove this now, okay, this might be really confusing or might not work. So always you have to define your default constructor if you're not using it. Okay, if you're using a telescopic or constructors with parameters. Okay, good. So one problem here is we are telling param 1, param 2, param 3, and param 4. The problem here is you know you have to remember the mapping. Okay, so okay, the param 1 is mapped to id, param 3 is mapped to last name. Okay, this is a little difficult for everyone, right? So even when we are creating an object, it was really difficult. Okay, for example, if I go there again, and if I try to create a new employee again, for example, I name it as Suresh. New employee, right? So it defines. See, I don't know which one to pass. See, the IntelliJ ID is suggesting, hey, first one is integer, but that is param 1. Okay, what is param 1? I don't know. So I have to basically go to the employee class to understand what is param 1. Okay, this is mapped to ID. So this is really difficult for me. So what I can do, if I can name this parameter also as ID. This is ID. And then this is first name, right? This is last name, and this is permanent employee. Okay, now if I go here and if I type this, okay, control and space, if I type 1, it will basically actually, so there is an error. We will first resolve that and we'll come here. So what is happening? See, it is telling there is no thing called as param 1. Okay, now I have the right hand side as ID, the left hand side as first name, and the last name here, and the is permanent employee. There is actually a problem here, because see, we are having left hand side that is same as right hand side, so it does not understand. Oh, this guy is having an ID, okay, variable, he is assigning the same value to this, why he is doing this operation? Okay, it doesn't understand. But actually what I want to do is, I want to assign this parameter value to this variable, global variable. Okay, so what I can do to differentiate is, see, I can use a different name, which we have actually did, but that was really confusing. So what you can basically do, you can basically add one word called as this. This means this class. Okay, in this class, if there is a thing called as ID, So basically this dot id means it refers to this. Okay, id means refers to this parameter that you are passing. So the same way I can add this.
Java concepts వచ్చు.
Yeah. Okay, so the reason why we are using this is because this actually normally points to your class variables. Okay, so that is this ones. Okay, by default. Okay, so otherwise you need to use a different parameters name, which was really confusing, which was not really good practice. So every time when you use constructors and passing the parameters, you want to differentiate between your global variables and your parameters, use the keyword called as this. This also has a lot of other values, but for now, just to understand, this basically points to your global variable. It tries to differentiate between the id. See, this is in red color. This id also is in red color. This id is in some yellowish, light yellowish color, and this id is also in yellowish color. Okay, so this is a thing that is provided by IDE IntelliJ, but for now, even if it does not give you the color difference, you should be in a position to understand what is referring to what. Right? Good. Now the same way you can also change this. No, every time we create a constructor, we are spending a lot of time, right? So instead, if the IDE can help us to create this. Okay, so press Alt and Insert on your keyboard, so you can see the shortcuts. Okay, if you're using Mac operating machines also, so you can see the shortcuts here. Okay, so now I want to create a constructor. Okay, now it is asking me what kind of constructor you want to create, or what and all the fields you want to use to create. I want to select all the fields. I can press Control A and then click OK. So it basically creates all the thing for me, right? So see, it actually created everything for me. So now this basically throws some errors. We can obviously fix this. Yeah, so it is telling you're passing it. See, the order that it generated is different. Okay, so it has generated age here, company name, and then the is permanent employee, because it creates by default in the order that you have created here. Okay, id, first name, last name, age, company name, permanent employee, id, first name, last name, age. So it creates in the same order. Okay, but when we are creating, we have the liberty to create in whatever the order we want. So now I have to remove this, and then I need to understand in what order I want to create. Okay, so let's remove all of this, and then let's try to create something. What I can do, see, now it is telling, hey, first you need to pass id. You have two options. Either you pass id string, the first name, last name, permanent employee, or id first name, last name, age, company name, permanent employee. So what is the choice you have? So we have two constructors, parameterized constructors, and it is showing us all the options. And by seeing here itself, I can understand I need to pass an id here, right? So that is 6. Okay, and then I need to pass a first name, that is basically some values, right? So you can basically do all these things, right? And then second one is also that. Now it is telling, okay, you need to pass true or false. Okay, yeah, so this is, yeah, I can basically do this. So even here it is highlighting id, first name, last name, and is permanent employee. So this is the advantage of using the parameter name that is same as your variables names. Okay, so that's all about it, guys. So you can also use IntelliJ to create constructors for you. Again, Alt and Insert, constructor, what fields you want. You can press Control and then select what and all fields you want. Suppose I want only the constructor with these 3 fields, you can do this. So this process of having a multiple constructors with different parameters, or different number of parameters, is called as constructor overloading. Okay, so that's the beauty about constructors. So constructor is very powerful, and yeah, so this is all about constructors. Any doubts in this so far? I know I spent 30 minutes in constructors, because without understanding what is a constructor and what it does, you cannot really progress in Java. If you cannot progress in Java, you cannot understand Selenium, you cannot understand APM, you cannot understand REST assured, or whatever the automation library you're going to learn in future. Okay, so constructors are basically really important. That's why I spend a lot of time here. And for now, if you go back to our basics, we created, let's say, first Maven test. Okay, here. Okay, sorry guys, I went to. So let me close all the tabs. Okay, I go here. So now if you notice, new H driver, right? So what we are doing here, basically. So we previously used new Chrome driver. So you can understand the right point side, right? So right side, we are creating a new object for Chrome driver, and the reference variable is driver, right? But we aren't here yet. We didn't cover why. Normally we can use Chrome driver equal to new Chrome driver. Okay, it's not mandatory that you have to keep WebDriver here. We are not yet there to understand at this point of time. But if you know, this is the class that is in Selenium. We are trying to create an object for Chrome driver, and this is the reference variable. Using this reference variable, you can access all the methods that you have. For example, in employee class, we also have methods like work, right? If we want to access that method, we need to create an employee object, and then we need to put dot and then call the method. The same way they are doing this. Okay, we have create an object for Chrome driver. New is the keyword used, and Chrome driver, they are using the default constructor because they are not passing any arguments. So this is the default constructor, and using this particular reference variable, they are calling all the methods it has, right? So now you can understand what this particular piece of statement does, right? That's very important. Any doubts?
Yeah. So Muthan, that means when we are writing driver equal to new Chrome driver, right? So that means the sole purpose of this one is the so that we can access the methods present in this driver reference variable, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
So we are creating an object for this because we want to leverage all the methods that they have created. For example, I can go inside this particular class and see there are this is the Chrome driver. So there are other Chrome driver constructors as well. So if you notice, this is the Chrome driver. So this is a constructor because this is a class name. This is also class name. This is almost a same class name, right? And then you have the default constructor. They are doing some operation with the default constructor as well. And apart from that, they also have overloader constructor where you can pass Chrome driver servers. They also have one more Chrome driver that's accepting capabilities. So for example, they also have one more Chrome driver that accepts Chrome options. Again, guys, I haven't covered what is Chrome options and all that. We are going to see about that. Okay, so they are also having one more Chrome driver constructor that accepts service and options. Okay, so they have different Chrome drivers. So till here they have all these many constructors. Okay, almost 6 to 7 constructors. Okay, so yeah, this is what they are doing. So they have different methods here. Okay, get storage, what is location, set location, get touch, everything is basically here, right? Good. So we have not yet covered inheritance, so I cannot explain you where is this get method, but for now just understand we are creating an object for this, and this is the reference variable. Using this reference variable, you can access this object, change and modify the state of the object, and you can call the methods as well. Okay, any doubts? Okay, I assume that you guys have no doubts. Let me just take what I want to cover, and okay, now I have covered about this keyword, right? Let's say we have class objects demo test where we are working basically. We are working here. Yeah, we are working here. So for example, I'll remove all this. Okay. Let's not give this. Okay, let's not give this. So will this code will work? Okay, will this code work? Anyone can, just make a guess what this will do.
Creates object.
Yeah, it creates an object. Yeah, what else it can do? So basically what I was expecting was it basically calls the constructor here. Okay, it goes and calls this constructor, it creates an object, it reserves some space for you in the memory, and I could see some chat. Yes, calls default constructor, exactly. So yeah, it calls the default constructor, it reserves some space for you in the memory, and we call this particular thing as anonymous object. Okay, anonymous object. Anonymous means it's nameless. Okay, it's nameless or variable-less object. Variable-less object. Okay, so previously we have employee. We have written like this: employee Sargent equal to new employee. Okay, we have written like this, and this is not anonymous object because it has a reference variable. it has someone pointing to this. Okay, so you can basically alter this object with the help of this particular variable. But if you want to alter this object, you don't have any other way. Okay, you don't have ways, because if you have a variable, then you can do variable dot and then you can set some values. Okay, you can put chin dot and then set some values and all that. So I want to change all this, you can do this. But here you don't have all that. But then, people might use this, let's say, if they want to use it only once. Okay, for example, I just need to create an object, and for whatsoever reasons, okay, if I just put a dot here, okay, if you notice, it is almost same. It's populating me an option to set the values and all that. Okay, so for example, I am trying to set some values. Okay, you can also basically do this. Okay, see, I have just wrapped this whole thing together. Okay, so you can basically set id, abcd. So but since this cannot be pointed, but it can be created. Okay, so for now, uh, the only thing what I am trying to say here is, the constructor, even though you cannot, you assume it doesn't return you anything. So for example, if we go here, uh, this constructor is not returning you anything, so the return type is not there. I also mentioned does not have any explicit return type. Okay, I've told it does not have any explicit return type, which means it can have implicit return type. Implicit return type. What do you mean by explicit and implicit? Explicit means, okay, here they are explicitly having a return type like void. Okay, you have to explicitly mention that. Here we don't mention it, so we assume that it does not return you anything, but actually it return whatever the object that you create. So whatever the variable reference, it basically created, it gives you that. Basically it means, it basically return this. Okay, it basically means it returning you this current class object, whatever the object that you are creating, it return you the same thing. That's the reason. For example, go here. If I just type work, okay, I can call the work method. Okay, here I will use sachin dot work. Okay, I can call the work method because I have a reference variable and I can call this particular employee's work method. Same way, here also I have an employee. This guy is also an employee, but this guy is not given the ID yet. He is just a temporary employee for just maybe 1 or 2 days. He is coming, but he has to still work, right? So basically, I can call the method only if there is a reference variable. Here I don't have the reference variable, so your left hand side is equal to right hand side, right? So instead of just doing this, you can also do new employee and then call the work method. Still it will execute. Okay, this work method will be executed 9 hours, 9 hours. The reason why you could call the method is because even though for your naked eyes, this employee is not returning anything, but internally or implicitly, it is having a return type that is this current class object. So whatever the new employee, okay, it is actually returning that. That's the reason. If you just want to print it once and you have no intention to reuse this anywhere in the future, then you can just use an anonymous object and then call the work method. Okay, if you have an intention to modify a lot of things like first name, last name, you need to reuse this multiple times, then you can create a reference variable and then you can act with the reference variable. This is not really important for now, but what I am trying to say is constructor might not have an explicit return type, but it has an implicit return type of this current class object. This will be definitely asked in an interview. If you are going to any Java Selenium interview, this will be your first question, or most probably they will ask this. Okay, as constructor, what is a constructor? What is a method? They will definitely ask this. Okay, if you're going to an entry level job in any companies. Good. Any other doubts?
How many types of objects are there? Just you said anonymous object.
So this is, see, this is an object. Okay, you don't have to really worry about it. See, object is basically an object. Okay, if it is having a name, if it does not have a name, we are just telling it as anonymous object. Okay, that's the only difference. Okay, it's not like it is not an object, it is also an object. Okay, there is no classification like different types of object at all. Okay, when there is an object that doesn't have a name, we call it as anonymous object technically. Okay, it doesn't matter, and we don't have a distinguished like segregation, like there are two types of objects, one is anonymous, one is not anonymous, or something like that. Since we don't have it, I don't want to mention it. Okay, so if you somewhere in your code you see someone is using like this, then you need to understand, if someone is asking in an interview what does a constructor return, then you need to be very specific, because most people answer constructor does not have a return type, but actually it does. So you have to be very clear with your answer. It does not have an explicit return type, but it implicitly returns the current class object, or whatever the object that you are creating, it basically returns you that. If you're asking how, please explain, then you need to write this piece of code and then explain him, I could call the work method because it has returned me something, it has returned me the current object, so that I can able to call the work method. So you have to explain like this. Okay, good. So the same way you can basically go here, instead of assigning something like this, if you have, you don't want to do this, let's say, let's remove all these things. Okay, and here also I'm removing this. So new Chrome driver dot can also still do all these things. Okay, get, okay, or string constants. You can also do this. This will also work. But the problem here is you cannot do other operation. Maybe if you want to just use for only one time, you can do this. But again, guys, I have commented on code. So new Chrome driver, here I'm using Chrome. Okay, if you want to launch Chrome driver, I have to use Chrome driver. Let me stop the execution. So basically it is launching the URL. Yeah, so, good. Any other doubts? Otherwise we will wrap the session, guys. Let me stop the recording.